Hello and welcome to the Newgen webinar, Future of Shared Services, Enhance the Efficiency through Intelligent Process Automation. I am Sumit Joshi and I shall be your host and moderator for this webinar. I thank you all for making the time to join us today. The response has been overwhelming and we are excited to talk about the need to enhance the efficiency of shared services through intelligent process automation. Today with us, Gavin Maxwell from Ernst& Young. He is GPS and Finance Transformation Leader, Middle East and North Africa. He is leader in finance, supply chain, operations, and business services practice. He has over 20 years of experience working with leading organizations in the public and private sectors to create their vision and operating strategies, as well as helping to drive large scale transformation alongside clients. We also have a co-presenter, Sriram from Newgen Software. He leads Center of Excellence for GBS and Enterprise Automation. He has been part of various roles in Newgen in his 22 plus year stint and has been part of many GBS successes. While Gavin will take us through the emerging trends in shared services centers in the Middle East, Sriram will deep dive into how intelligent process automation can enhance the efficiency of shared services. At the end of the presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. We request you to type your questions in the question window of your GoToMeeting anytime during the webinar, and our experts will address them at the end of the session. Over to you, Gavin. Thank you.
Thank you very much and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. At some stage, I need to update that bio to go more than 20 years, more than 25 years, more than 30 years as life moves on. But I guess a very, very quick background to myself. So I've been working in shared services since the late 90s from Ireland, which for those who are kind of familiar with some of the evolution of European shared services, Ireland was one of the starting points as an entry point to Europe for a lot of the US companies looking to move in the kind of the late 90s. And what was quite interesting and what inspired me around shared services wasn't just setting up shared services in Ireland at the time, and then as we moved into Europe and globally, but it was also as Ireland went from being a relatively low cost location to a much higher cost location quite quickly, how shared services reinvented themselves to continue to focus on driving value. So a lot of these shared service or the organizations that placed shared services in Ireland in that kind of the late 90s, early 2000s still have their shared services there. Not doing the same scope of services, but actually having kind of evolved and transforming themselves. So that's very much my, I guess, a theme for today for me. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about where we're seeing trends, but also trying to make it very MENA relevant and specific as well. And so hopefully you'll get a little bit of a trend around what's happening globally, but also very, very clearly as well where MENA is either catching up or trying to play leapfrog as well. My Ireland story is, I guess, a very nice background to where we see GBS today, originally today, and where we expect it to be tomorrow in the 2.0. And again, I think most people on the call are broadly familiar with the original drivers to shared services, heavily cost optimization driven once upon a time, significant use of hubs in low cost locations or lower cost locations, a push to offshore and outsource, almost both words used in interchangeably, with some organizations that were large enough to run offshore captives doing the same. We still see some of that, without a doubt. It is a multi-spoke hub and spoke model for global shared service organizations, for global organizations, is still very much part of an operating model. That being said, what we have seen now is a significant move towards digitization and automation, which starts to again change the nature of why you would offshore. If you look at the original criteria that consultants would use to say this service is ready to move shared services, and this is one within shared services, you could offshore versus nearshore versus onshore. a lot of the criteria we would have used, repeatable, scalable, is actually the rationale for why you would look to automate it instead. So now I think um, it's less about moving something to a low cost location and more about how do we make sure the computer does it instead. And then I think the other part of it is shared services is a very mature service delivery model. There is, even within MENA at this stage, the emotional question around saying, does it work, has been clearly addressed. So what we are seeing now is for some of these shared service organizations that are doing a good job around operational excellence and efficiency, now earning the right to move into other areas like in finance, the finance FP&A. And we're seeing that globally as well. So some of the big players are now looking to say, okay, we've done a lot with, for example, our finance shared services. How do we bring some more of our business finance in now at scale and at anchor? So I think that's where we are. MENA wise, again, I would say somewhat similar, and I'll come back to that in the next slide. But where are we going? Because, again, I like it. I spent a lot of time working with Tata Steel once upon a time, and their group CFO was a big fan of saying, don't tell me about leading practices, Gavin. Tell me about what the leading organizations are planning to do so that by the time they're there, leading practice has evolved and my target is behind. I want to target where they're targeting so I can close the gap on the world leaders. So what are the other things that some of the bigger, more established leaders in shared services are thinking about as part of their kind of the value add 2.0? In general, and we use the idea of a transformation engine. And that's very much, and I'll show you an operating model of what that looks like in a minute. But that's very much what I think we're trying to aim towards. And the first part of it is how does the GBS organization really get seen as a value generator for the business? If you listen to Tony Saldana when he talks about the P&G story, he was saying that there's a 3-to-1 value creation versus cost reduction on P&G's shared services or their GBS organization over a 10-year period. And that's very much what I think is the holy grail of GBS. How do you start to articulate a believable story around value creation? Without that, one of the second areas is the user experience, the internal customer as well as the external customer dealing with corporate services. And certainly, a whole series of new tools around service management, the speed with which you can now use the kind of whether it's mobile phones, tablets, or PCs, and that kind of multi-use or multi-access, omni-channel experience. I think that's fundamentally transforming how people consume services, corporate services. The third one is, I'm working with a client here right now, and the chief people officer, when we set up their human capital unit, had said her expectation and what she's stating explicitly now is she will take her future human capital leaders from, for the retained organizations, the verticals, the business partner roles, as well as for centers of excellence from the shared service organization. So how do you really create and foster talent that will continue to progress through the organization, whether it's within the GBS or shared service organization or in the corporate itself? And then the other one, which I still haven't seen too much of done well, but which I think a lot of my more mature clients are currently looking at globally and regionally, is establishment of really true global business owners, business process owners, where they own the budget, they own the IT investment, potentially they even have the people mapped to them. So a very, very significant role, as opposed to the role in the past, which would have been, the person that effectively drives some of the process optimization, but really doesn't have P&L or people responsibility. If I look at, a slightly different version of that as well, what are we seeing from a regional perspective? And, and again, I'm going to use GBS and shared services terms interchangeably. I know within the region in MENA, I tend to use shared services a lot as a concept. It's not just referring to on the bottom left of the picture. It really is just as a generic term for global business services. But globally, we do use GBS, then intelligent GBS, and now even more so the transformative GBS as kind of our terms. I use them a lot less in MENA, to be perfectly honest. The concept of global doesn't always resonate well with clients that are either regional or single market focused. Although global tends to mean kind of end to end, it gets distorted, it gets lost in translation. So what are we seeing here, or what am I seeing here? Very much still people setting up a combination of multifunctional shared services and GBS, GBS 1.0, if you're looking at the slide right now. Still very heavily focused on productivity. There's certainly an expectation. It's not about cost optimization, but it is around the effectiveness and the efficiency of the organization itself. So sure, cost becomes a core part of it, but it isn't what I'm seeing right now, the driving force. It is how do we make best use of resources. And so there is also an intent around digitization, which sits there. Clearly, our region is not the cheapest region in the world. And there's also a reluctance to offshore a lot of activity across a lot of our different sectors that we focus in on. And so the automation aspect of it becomes very important. So if I look at the trends, that hyper automation and digitization is more prevalent, I think, here, although the scope of services may look a little bit more like multifunctional or GBS 1.0, there is a hyper automation part of it that is very core. I don't see us really having many clients in the region that really are focused on that end-to-end record to report, hire to retire. So the typical end-to-end process, and I've seen nobody in the region really working use cases. So that would be like new employee onboarding, where you have a bit of IT around laptops and network access and things, a little bit of finance around maybe payroll or approvals, HR in terms of the LMS, all coming together, and facilities for badges, etc., all coming together as one and operating as one team with one set of SLAs or metrics. I see very little of that anywhere. A number of clients are trialing it globally for some use cases, but I don't really see us getting there yet. But what I do see on the trends, certainly the people centricity, adoption, and the user experience is key. Service innovation, service management, so the use of a whole number of service management tools to provide a wrapper and a new experience, absolutely as well. And I'm starting to see a little bit more around, particularly with all of the jump on Gen AI, machine learning, and a lot of the AI usage, certainly an interest and an adoption of individual use cases as part of shared services within the region as well. I'm obviously going through this at pace, but please do feel free, as was mentioned at the start. If you have questions, just ping them in, and we'll try and get to the Q&A at the end of both of our presentations, and go into a little bit more detail to help answer any specific questions. So what am I seeing some of the leading GBS organizations thinking about to play catch up, or for those organizations that are in a lead position to stay ahead? So first of all, it's experience. And again, these themes are kind of repeating themselves slightly, but I'll try and pull out things which are unique. So I like that first one, customer-led, human-centered service design. And I think that's key. Second one, and as I said, a lot of the technology tools today really allow for consumption of services in an omni-channel way. So how do we take the Amazon experience and bring it to finance or human capital? So I think experience is core, and that drives adoption, usage, and then the opportunity for continuous improvement. Let me jump to the bottom right, then performance is core as well. The reality is you do need to be able to demonstrate that you are delivering value in your core operations in order to earn the right to do anything else. And so are you able to do things better, faster, cheaper than once upon a time it was done, but provide real-time visibility and transparency? And then, as I said, driving insight, driving analytics. But as a result, that normally means having to fix a lot of the master data challenges, which you then become the owner of. I think part of that then, if I go up to the top on the scale and innovation, it is very much around doing more with less. and being able to, I like the line, computers for the ordinary, humans for the extraordinary. And I think that's very much the concept that I would be addressing there on the scale of innovation. Um, and then all of that, if I go back to the bottom left on branding and talent, has two different parts to it. Now, when I set up shared services and do org design with my clients, I will normally put in something around marketing and sales, even if it's a cost center sitting in government. And they're going, we don't need marketing or branding. We're not trying to sell our services. We're not an outsourcing company. But the reality is that in just the same way as any other vertical within a business, if you think about GBS as a business within a business, is in brand and sales, you are right. The NPS score, the customer satisfaction, the voice of the customer score is the same as in retail or any other service provider. Your ability to grow your scope, grow your revenue, and continue to add value depends on people believing and wanting to consume more of your services. So I think that's one part that gets overlooked a lot here. But the second part of it is for all of the digitization, it's how do you take a skills first transformation approach to your employees? How do you hire the right type of employee that gives you that flexibility to grow the employee? And as they start to continue to evolve their skills, how do you put in the right training programs and the right mindset for them to be part of that? You're no longer taking someone who works in finance and has them as a day job as an accountant. They are now part of that transformation engine, so they need to think bigger. That's exciting if it's done in the right way. It's a train wreck if it isn't. And so, again, another sound bite I love is the only way to stay relevant is to look to make yourself obsolete. And I think that's, I spent a lot of time in the military, and we frequently talk about groups, teams, and individuals. And that really is the same analogy. The organization needs to look to make itself obsolete to stay relevant. GBS needs to look to make itself obsolete in order to stay relevant. And individual employees and every one of us needs to look to make ourselves obsolete in order to stay relevant. Otherwise, we'll go the way of Kodak. So what does that look like in terms of what a model could look like? And I put this up not as the art of the possible. If I think of two or three of the more recent GBS organizations I've stood up, I'm in Riyadh at the moment, and two of them that I've stood up recently in Riyadh have taken a variant on what you see on the page right now. And it is, okay, the delivery excellence is the core. I wouldn't call it a factory anymore because we've automated, right? So but it's that core capability that delivers. And really, I don't care about the sourcing model. You can see that on the left. Captive, hybrid, outsourced, or automated, to be honest. It is, you still have ownership as a GBS organization for these services, whether they're automated or outsourced. And again, the idea is that that becomes your main engine room that does quite a lot of the volume of work that gets done. It's managed and optimized through those global service and solution owners. So the global process owners that I talked about before, their job is to facilitate and work with a bunch of others to drive that automation, to look at new services that can be provided, and ultimately to own the responsibility for the delivery. Then we're seeing capabilities as a service, and that's more into the enhance and innovate area. And some of these are more, how do we then give back to the organization for value added services? And so if I think about something like design thinking labs, one of the clients I'm seeing later on today, when they set up their shared services, that's actually one of the areas that had the most impact quickly. They have really amazing offices that are built for design thinking. They have a bunch of experts focused on design thinking, and they run that as a service across the full organization. The organization, in typical Vision 2030 style, is setting up new companies and new projects on a daily basis. And the GBS organization, as well as doing procurement and payroll and all of the other stuff, does this as a service for the broader group, which drives significant marketing opportunity. And then the GBS cockpit running it as a business. And that's all the stuff that you'd expect, but again, gets forgotten about, right? When you're setting up shared services, I receive an RFP, it's finance, HR, IT, procurement, facilities, or whatever the scope might be. Nobody actually ever thinks about the brain or the nucleus of the GBS organization, which is also fundamental to really have it run as a business. So, obviously technology is core to this webinar. So what are we seeing in terms of the technologies that are coming through? I think one of the things is around how do you tie together the various different technologies, and there are some tools, we'll hear in a minute from Newgen, around how they have tools that kind of go across workflow as well as kind of system of record, and kind of join the dots as well as around hyper automation. If you're not in that luxury where everything is in one, what's the architecture which allows the different parts of your organization to talk? Where do you need still a best of breed technology? How does that integrate through to your service management tools? Data is always an issue. How do you make sure that you have that data lake, particularly now as we look at some of the new AI disruption, which only really works if you've got data that makes sense. How are you using AI? Because again, there's a little bit of an ostrich syndrome that could be happening right now. The leaders in the world in post AI are those who learn how to use AI well early. So there's quite a lot. I mean, obviously the self-serve and self-solve is another core as part of the user experience and as part of the efficiency of the operations of shared services. So lots happening there. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to pause myself there with a big thank you, hand it back over. And again, if you do have questions, we do have time at the end for a little bit of a Q&A, but hopefully you found that of interest. So again, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Gavin, for sharing your valuable insights. Now, Sriram, I would like you to take over.
Okay, thank you, Gavin, for the insights, and thank you, Sumit. Let me talk about the future of automation and the impact of technologies in GBS or GCCs. More focused from a point of view that Gavin shared, more from a end-to-end digital automation and more of intelligent automation and the tools relating to that and the future of GBS and all. So let me concentrate on that factor and let me move on. Hope my screen is visible. Let me talk about the future. The future is driven by the ecosystem GBS are in. The ecosystem plays a significant role in defining the success of a GBS. The ecosystem is not just limited to the transaction processing, but goes beyond in more of peer comparisons, the technology adoptions, meeting the stakeholder journeys, and the more resilient and sustainable operations. Technology becomes a key in adapting to the growing dynamic demands of the environment we are in, like what Gavin said. There is a whole lot of digital initiatives and digital transformations that happen. And similarly, the orchestration of processes across applications becomes a key factor in quick onboarding of FTEs as well as the standardization of the processes across silos of transaction management tools. We do have multiple ERPs and we also have multiple other applications that take care of the transaction needs of the organization. So building a layer on top of it to ensure that there is standardization achieved across the organization becomes another key imperative. Another key is how others in the industry are performing and their matrices in relating to the transaction management, operational aspects, as well as the strategies that they adopt to be in line with their stakeholder expectations. So how do we match to these matrices and also scale beyond to be leaders is another area of achievement that we need to think about as part of the ecosystem. And technology, process, and stakeholder experience together deliver the right automation for the organization. An automation done right delivers frictionless customer experience, a great customer experience to be precise, great operational experience aspects, and also business innovation exceeding the stakeholder expectations. Automation is not a choice or not driven by compulsion because we need to do automation. While there could be plenty of parameters that define a compulsive business case for automation, the most prominent ones at high level include benefits resulting both from a direct cost benefits as well as the intangible cost benefits. The time to realize, because by the time we realize, those concepts and strategies should not get outdated, or the market should not be matured enough before these realization happens as part of the digital initiatives. An optimized ROI or a per transaction cost, which is justifiable to do that kind of automation, and also categorization based on overall expectations from such processes. Perhaps a nice to have could be a couple of transactions per month, which may not be good enough to automate as part of any digital automation. Maybe there could be other compelling reasons, but the idea here is to look at the low hanging fruits as well as the processes or the automations that will give higher level of benefits. Typically, the automation starts from digitalization to complex workflows. A workflow at a primitive stage looks at as is tasks or as we see it tasks, sequencing for employee productivity. Typically, these are automations done through bots or linear workflows as part of the applications or the transaction management applications to be precise. A little more maturity comes when complete transaction is mapped right from start to end to the workflow, including discrepancy management and a couple of dashboards to provide visibility, as well as some kind of omni-channel uh, activities so that no, it covers all the stakeholders. Enterprise automation, which is at the next level, handles the complete ecosystem by handling internal and external tasks or tasks related to the internal and external stakeholders while creating standardization across the organization. This includes mergers and acquisition based uh, orchestration of the processes or perhaps usage of silos of application for transaction management. A true business transformation addresses the end-to-end or hyper-automation needs as per the standard operating procedure of the organization and ensures a complete digital footprint for each and every task that happens, which indirectly enhances the visibility, auditability, and compliance as per the organizational needs and vision. This digital footprint helps in quick review and implementation of stakeholder needs, innovate on the industry matrices, which could be the best practices or better practices as we call them, bring continuous optimization and enhance the scope of GPS alignment to the parent organization. So rather than being a cost center for the organization, GBS can scale up to be part of inclusive as part of the decision making and the strategical innovative exercises. A true digitally driven organization needs dynamic tools that will help in continuous and faster change management. It's not a one time do and rest based on the transactions that keep happening. Optimization needs to be done at more productivity of the FTs as well as the efficiency of the tasks or the processes that happen. So it goes hand to hand. This expectation is handled by tools that help in faster ideate to realize models through simulation and quick prototyping. This ensures implementation of such improvements before they become obsolete. Because of the fast change management nature of tools like low code, the time to realize of the changes or the dynamic requirements of the industry or the mandates from the regulatory bodies, how fast they can be adopted into the system is one of the key criteria in selecting tools. And low codes help in achieving these quick changes at the fastest possible time to enable be up in the curve and ready for the deployments. Low code based tools helps in such dynamic automation needs, which we are talking about. Host of low code platforms are available in the market with varied extensive tools for, for business transformation needs. However, the one which can help in end-to-end automation or hyper automation, which Gavin also spoke about, including mapping the stakeholder journeys from end to end, which is the standard operating procedures, if that tool covers the entire journey and SOPs, and that is the tool that we should look for. And what all happens as part of these end-to-end hyperautomation journeys should be recorded as part of artifacts, data, information, audit, and many other things, so that there is a digital footprint created for each and everything that happens as part of the system. So what is more important here is the enablers, and what these enablers are. These enablers, we call it as the three pillars of automation. One, which is the top line, which these tools are the enablers which help in mapping the top line growth of the organization. Second, which takes care of the bottom line improvements, including optimization, productivity, efficiency, and more. And also, not just stagnate over there or saturate over there, but continuously do the innovation for continuous process improvements, benefits, and be up in the curve as required by the market. The maturity level of the organization in their automation varies. They vary from simple information to complex information. They vary from simple departmental business flows or ASIS flows that we spoke about to complex enterprise-wide business processes, which we also call it as the SOPs, right? So what we have seen is that there are multiple ways of transformation. These transformations can be from a strong content management platforms, a document driving or a data driving the workflow, or a document driving the complete end-to-end process like invoices, or it could be a combination of both, where the requirement is to satisfy both the data and document and come out with all the rules in the system and provide for processing of them as part of the digital footprint. If you see, the real essence of these low code is that what the core applications cannot enhance to. The first part is that if you look at the workflows which are pre-built as part of the core applications or the transaction management applications, they cover up to 30-40% of the SOP tasks. What we need is a digital footprint as part of the end-to-end digital framework or the hyperautomation, which means that we need tools which can really map the entire tasks of SOPs and help us with a digital footprint for each and every task. And what we also look for is what is the future of these processes going to be. They are going to move away from the reactive mode of working today, where you take out reports to find out what has happened, to being proactive with alerts and notifications and point of failures, a more proactive pointing towards the point of failures. And similarly, we are going to move away from the prescriptive typical validations to a predictive analysis of whether these transactions will fail going forward or they are going to be successfully taken as part of the ERP or the other integration factors. Right? So AI is also going to make a significant impact with its analytical capabilities and also bring in a change in the way currently decisions are made as part of the processes. AI is going to provide information in such a way that users will be able to take controlled decisions or assisted decisions in ensuring that the points of failures or risks are eliminated to the maximum. AI is also going to enable touchless processing, where we are talking about future is going to be a less touch or touchless processing. So the more the prediction capabilities come as part of the frameworks, the system is going to automatically process those transactions without even requiring for the human assistance till the time it senses a point of failure as part of the data predictions. So future is going to be touchless processing or process by exception, a more of a continuous process innovation, which means continuously evolve the processes to bring in the productivity, efficiency, and hence the optimization, as well as automate the entire stakeholder journey, be it internal or the external. The enhancement of the tools to address to the experience by these stakeholders is going to be a key takeaway as part of the future automation. And these futuristic automations are aligned to outcomes. And these outcomes are not just to say that there is a cost benefit or it is a kind of what you call optimization of the cost or enhancing the productivity, but it is going to go a long way in ensuring that because of these automated way of working, the compliance is taken care, so the risk factors are eliminated. More standardization comes into the system because of cross boundary, cross geography, cross continents, cross country mode of working, embedding the compliance and regulatory needs of each and every country and entity, as well as ensuring that mergers and acquisitions take care of the standardization of the process across the organizations. It's also going to take care of the faster processing, how touchless it can be, or how minimal human touch will be required, and also take care of the personalization based on the country, based on the regional factors, as well as the currency and the related regulatory needs. And of course, the most important is going to be on how the return on investment is going to be measured, how much of savings is going to come, how much of payback is going to happen back to my parent organization, so that the organization realizes the value of GBS and GBS becomes part of the strategic decision making portions. And visionary automation leads to sustained growth. So if I have to start about how the maturity curve of shared services have gone or the GBS have gone, is that the first few months have been on establishing and ensuring that the processes that have been transitioned are effectively handled, and there is a reliability on the services provided with the shared service. Moving on to the efficiency, bringing in more optimization and the results that are envisaged by the stakeholders while setting up the GBS, moving into more of technology related orchestration and the exception management along with the content repositories and all. Then moving in to improve the bottom line of the transaction processing or the GBS setup as a whole, and then moving into the top line where the GBS also is a participant to the strategic decision making as part of the parent organization, and also bringing in adaptability so that any realization that the stakeholders want in the parent organization are quickly transformed by these GBS, ensuring that the service delivery is to the maximum possible extent. And this brings me to presenting Newgen 1, the platform for your digital transformation needs. What is Newgen 1? As I've been talking about, it's a low code application development framework. It's a low code from all aspects, right from creating these end-to-end hyperautomation framework with all the nodes, all the tools, and all the technologies that are required, moving into the process automation framework where the end-to-end process can be mapped, whether it is a sequential, parallel, or dynamic case management, robotic process automation, the rules automation, or you talk about the contextual services, the communication, how it can happen across the organizations, the stakeholders, and the external as well, bringing in the AI layer for the optimal analytics, and also enhancing the touchless processing, the way you can realize all these aspects as part of process automation, bringing in a catalog of reusable services, which indirectly means how an integration can be defined with any of the application that are being currently used. It could be a tight integration, it could be a loose integration, or it could be a semi-tight. It could be from the most modern technologies through all the JSONs and web services and APIs to the legacy through what we call it as the UI enablement, or we talk about the uh, screen scraping kind of models. The entire integration framework, right from consuming the catalog of services to the primitive way of integration, are taken care as part of this integration layer. And the most importantly is that since this tool helps in creating the end-to-end digital footprint, it also takes care of creating an audit log for each and every action that happens on the system, which is non-erasable. This ensures that the compliance and the governance requirements of the entire digital framework is taken care of. Let me talk about a journey that we have done with one of our clients where, as I spoke about, it's all about outcomes. And outcomes are not the outcome of an implementation of a technology, but outcomes of using the technology for the business process automation needs of a GBS. It's a large GBS spanning across 80 countries, more than 1.5 million transactions per year, We are talking about complete automation of multiple towers or functions, as we call them as. So I'll talk about some three important areas that they have achieved. The first one is an improved first pass rate of more than 60%, which is STP rate, or going beyond STP is the first time right scenarios. So that has been increased by 60%. The average productivity of the team is above 90%, which means that the productivity from what it was to where it is has increased by more than 90%. The average end-to-end turnaround time is same day processing. What does that mean? Is that any transaction that gets into the GBS gets processed on the same day. Whatever may be the complex scenario of the processing, they are addressed by the automation tool, and it helps in completing the transaction on the same day. And the last one, which is 1.193 minutes fastest processing time, is the time a human touches on an average a transaction. So whatever may be your SOP, we have ensured that maximum automation is done by taking care of the compliance, but ensuring that the human touch for a transaction will not be more than 2 minutes. If you really see the last two aspects, if you go to the international or the global standards for processing, particularly on finance transactions, it is 2 days. The best performers are at 2 days, and we have exceeded the 2 days to 1 day over here as part of our joint. Of course, GBS also had a vision, and the tool also helped them realize the vision by bringing it to the same day processing part. And with that, let me also talk about the experience of Newgen as your digital transformation partner for GBS. We have been there for last 30 plus years. We are recognized by Gartner's market guide for APIA, which is accounts payable invoice automation, as well as magic quadrants of Gartner and various Forrester reports on digital transformation. We are there, we have been there in the business for 30 plus years, but most important is the ecosystem that we have integrated. You name the application used as part of the GBS transformation, we have been there. We have covered multiple, we have jumpstart templates to take care of various, uh, uh, what you call fastest time to go live kind of model. And we are here to, we have created all these jumpstart templates, which is more adaptable to the change as required, which includes your proof of future proof of technology, which we are bringing in a lot of enhancements like the AI and other factors, the quicker change management, launching of new products as part of the framework, as well as catering to all the vertical requirements of the GBS. Scalability of the GBS from a functional point of view is what I'm talking about here. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you all for patiently listening to me. I hand it over back to Sumit. Thank you once again. Sumit?
Thank you, Sriram, for sharing your wonderful thoughts on this. And now we shall be taking up the questions from the audience. So I request you all to type your questions in the chat window. Okay, I think we have one question. So the question is define a clear strategy for GPS and ensure it is clearly communicated. So, Gavin, would you like to answer it, please?
I'm not sure what's the actual question.
So, let me just repeat it. Define a clear strategy for GBS and ensure how it can be clearly communicated.
Look, I mean, that's quite broad, right? Because it depends on the nature of the organization. I wouldn't be a consultant if I didn't start with it depends. So, it really does depend on what who the organization is, what the value proposition is for GPS. Um, when I normally think about it, for me, for the strategy, there's a couple of parts to it. So I'm doing a PhD on shared services at the moment. And it's a never-ending one. I think I get more value out of saying I'm doing it than the likelihood of me ever becoming doctor. Um, but but I'm looking at what are the trends that keep leading GBS organizations as leading over periods of time, and really the core for it is that they're focused on value creation. and their scope can change to allow them to continue to focus on that value. So for me, that's got to be core to the strategy of the organization. If you define narrowly what the scope and the strategy of it will be, you don't give it the oxygen and the room to be able to grow in the medium term. So I think that's one part that's quite important as part of the strategy. So how does value get created? I think the second thing would be remiss of me not to say it does need to pay for itself. And so what are the automation opportunities? What's the optimization opportunities that early on will allow for that for the organization to earn the right to grow? And then the other part of it in terms of, I always look at the roadmap for shared services and to choreograph success. So what are maybe once every 6 months or so, what are slight interventions that are choreographed that would allow the organization to take a step back and go, wow, the shared service organization surprised us pleasantly here. So it's not just the business as usual operations. There's some evidence of that value creation. Every 6 months, one intervention I think would be important. I think there's a part of not getting too heavy on the overhead too quickly. If you look at my operating model that I showed with all of these, the middle one around enhance and innovate, as well as on the first, on the guide or the steer at the very, very top. That's all overhead until you have a revenue stream that allows it to get funded, even if it's not just a cost center. So I think it's also around think big, start small, and then be able to scale fast. So you don't create a huge overhead, but that you do push up front for a small number of roles that can give you evidence of that value creation. So, I mean, it's not a quick answer to what should the strategy be and how do you drive success to it. But I think there are some of the nuggets that are used as the ingredients in the strategy and on that roadmap. And then I think the final two or three things I would say is if I look at why they fail, because shared services is a 30 to 40-year-old business model that continues to evolve. There is no rocket science to getting shared services set up, and at the same time, they fail. Right? So why is that? There are two main drivers to it. One of them is sponsorship. You don't get the right change management in place. You don't get the right buy-in across enough of the organization to push it through, and it does need to get pushed. Typically these shared services that are successful are mandated in order to get that initial scale. There's no point in pretending that an internal shared services set up tomorrow can be as competitive as an outsourced provider. That's not the way it works. So that's one. The second is data. The data can be poor with. So the ability to build a business case to understand, well, what is the split of what the activities that are being done today? What is the catalog of services? Who is doing what? That level of detail is not something most organizations have. Even what's the volume of automated invoices versus invoices that need to be manually touched. The small basics, if you're not tracking it on a daily basis because it's not your focus, that information just isn't there. So being able to build a business case, justify it, and then work through the design is another challenge that's overlooked. And then I think the third is how fast can you adopt technology to drive transformation? Because ultimately, that creates the oxygen for that initial growth. It's the technology enablement. It's not that's centralized. Centralized is 5% savings, maybe 10% if you were very lucky. It's not standardized. If you're lucky, standardized will do 5 and 10% as well. It really is automate that's going to drive a huge amount of that early upfront business case return. And so how quickly do you get the IT and IT security and all of the other parts aligned to be able to make that happen to drive benefit? I'll stop on that and I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Gavin. Thanks for the answer. We have one more. So, from the audience, the question is, how does AI and intelligent automation impact GBS?
Would you
So,
like to?
yeah, Gavin, would you like to go? Yeah.
Sure. I'll do a little bit and then I'll throw it over maybe Sriram to you to complement it. So there's two parts to it. And again, let's divide the two of them. AI is brand new. It's very much the new kid on the block. I say brand new. It's not it's not industrialized yet. We're in the process of it becoming industrialized, as opposed to intelligent automation, which at this stage, to be honest, is a very known commodity. I think for intelligent automation, it kind of complements what I was saying a little bit earlier on. You need to create oxygen in the organization. Intelligent automation is the way to, if the idea isn't how do you move activities to a low cost location for something which can be eradicated completely from human touch, with humans really just doing exception processing. So I think that's the core of intelligent automation. It is how do you become digital first in terms of how you model the operating model and really use, as I said before, humans for the extraordinary only. It's not rocket science and it's not magic anymore. It's very practical. And so I think that's one part. Whether it's an end-to-end tool like a Newgen, whether it's point solutions, whether you're going back to the old days of building bots, whatever the intelligent automation platform you're using is, it's stable at this stage. So it's about getting those up and running, and making them just part and parcel of business as usual. AI, I think, is still a little bit more disruptive. And I go back to how do you create value? And that's where I think GPS or shared services can use AI. They sit on a lot of data. If you look at a kind of typical broad spectrum or shared services with finance, HR, IT, procurement, you suddenly have a huge wealth of information around the organization that you're sitting on. So how do you start applying things like machine learning to be able to do some of that? I think makes sense. Where intelligent automation stops because you need human input, the next question is how does AI start to replicate that human input to again rationalize even further where you actually need a human to touch? And so they become, Microsoft has their co-pilot, right? It becomes a co-pilot to you to be able to guide. So if I look at AI, I don't think today it'll replace, for those kind of exceptions, humans. What it does, I think, like a paralegal supporting a lawyer, I think it becomes like a paralegal for you. It gives you, this is with a 90% likelihood, this is what we think the right answer is. Click if you want to approve. And suddenly the 90% becomes 92, 94, 95 as it learns. And someday soon your tolerance level goes, if it goes to 90%, I'm not going to touch it. And so you're driving then hyper automation. I think the other one that's very exciting is as you start to look at moving into more value add services like finance and the FP&A function, writing reports as an example. How does AI get used to allow, and again, GPS as an innovation engine can pilot some of this to say, how can I write a report that takes 15 days with a variety of scenario planning using a chat GPT type of a concept or general AI, and there's lots of different tools around today to get that report that would take 15 days to write, done in one, and then a whole series of scenario analysis over 2 or 3 days, so that at day 4, you've got something which looks fundamentally different to what would have been produced at day 15 to allow different business decisions to be taken. So for me on AI, and I'll finish on this, AI does two things. It either does what can be done today by humans, but does it instantly. So we can do it today, but it's done instantly with AI, or it goes broader and wider and brings in insights that today just isn't feasible for the humans to be able to pull together because the trends or the analysis just is a bit too much for the average person to try and do. So they're the two most likely uses, I think, for AI when it comes to GPS. But maybe over to you, Sriram, for this, your thoughts.
Oh, yeah, you covered many of them, which are right. Let me give some examples of use case that we have handled as part of our Newgen One platform. Particularly when we talk about ML, right? So we talk about OCR. But what is required is document processing, not just OCR. So the way you do the OCR and also take care of apply the rules to get the right elements out of these documents and take care of the transaction processing. AI helps in better prediction of the right data that has to be picked up. That is one important area that we have used as part of the AI. The second is we have looked into contract management, get the content from the contract and help while matching the invoices, where you look into the contractor obligations, the expiry dates, the costs, the the matrices that are to be used against matching, and doing all those works. The third area that we have done with AI is also on the assisted approvals and assisted decision making, or the what you call the suggestive coding, where we talk about what are all the ways this particular invoice has been coded based on the previous historical information, and also predicting on what could be the right coding for this particular invoice in such a way that the number of reconciliations that happen during month end, quarter end, or year end can be highly reduced, right, because of improper coding. That is another area. And of course, we also taken care of automated approvals based on the AI predictive analysis, in the sense that we look at what was the approver and the kind of volumes or the values that they have been approving, and try to automate that part by automatically approving with lot of rules to ensure that invoices do not wait for approval, or any transaction for that matter does not wait for approvals. Some use cases. But as I told about in my slide, obviously there are plenty of use cases AI can be brought in to ease the way processing happens as part of GPS.
Okay,
Yes, Sumit.
great. Yeah, so we'll just take the final question since we're a little short on time. So the question is, we tried to automate one of AP processes. However, the cost of automation is higher than current cost. In such case, if it is your call, then what is the choice? That is the question. Anybody can take it. I mean,
And like I'll give my 2 cents on this. So what I love about a lot of our intelligent automation in general, is you can take a very agile approach. And so it isn't like you're about to buy a new ERP and it's a commitment for years on end, and it needs this huge return. And so it does allow you to start picking and choosing. Yet the reality is we are able to access, although some markets in our region are expensive, we are able to access lower cost resources here in comparison to, say, Western Europe or the States, which makes it harder to justify a business case at times. So I mean that's the reality. The second challenge is we don't always have the same scale of operations here that you would have. There are very few 5,000 person shared service organizations in MENA, and obviously, if you're dealing with volume, suddenly the business case becomes that little bit easier to make happen as well. For me, there are two elements to it, I think. One element is around saying, okay, so the actual cost per transaction is, that may question around whether you want to do it or not. I think it depends, right? If you're looking at AP, there's a little bit around speed and transparency. So there's some of the non-cost value adds and fraud, to say, are there elements where if we can put in automation, we remove fraud, we drive the customer experience up. So that would be one element which may be relevant for you. I think the second aspect is, okay, it's cheaper, but could we actually use those guys? Can we redeploy the people in to do something else that's actually more value add as well? And if so, are we looking at a cost avoidance and an upskilling? So could we move them across to being supplier relationship managers if you're talking about the accounts payable people, and saying, we can out of that same salary that we're paying, and let's look at not just a general backfill. We have people that understand it. So I think it becomes a challenge. I think, to be honest, it's one of the reasons why shared services in general was slower to come through in MENA, because you're not looking at those Western European costs for back office transactional processing. So I think it's a case by case basis. The reality is there may be times where it doesn't make sense, although you'd like to do it. But I would look then a little bit beyond just the simple cost play to say efficiency, speed, user stroke supplier customer experience, governance and control around things like fraud, and the potential redeployment of that asset into something else. So yeah, they would be some of my recommendations on it.
So, rightly said, Gavin. I go with you, but there are two factors which in my view, the first is whatever cost you are incurring today, plus the upcoming regulatory and other needs of that region. I'm sure e-invoicing is coming in a big way. So the cost of implementing them and your costs are going to go up perhaps based on those changes as well. So look at the overall cost. Number two is that obviously there is an industry standard for everything. So if you take AP process, there is an industry best practice based cost, and there is a timeline and productivity and a lot of matrices are available. If you are in line with that, then obviously that means the cost is right, justified. If you are not in line all those parameters, then it's a time for you to think about how a different tool can help you achieve these things. Obviously, ROI is important, but looking at the future upcoming requirements of GBS as well as AP process as part of that region, particularly on invoicing and other things, if you can do a mapping of current assets versus a real digital transformation tool and how it can really help you in optimizing the cost, the payback period and all, that will be the right way to start off and go ahead and implement the right tool.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, as a general rule of thumb, I typically find if you have more than 3 to 4 FTEs working on a particular process, the business case normally works. In terms of the cost around tools and licenses and implementation these days, it is, if you have 3 or 4 FTEs, it should work out cheaper. You may not get payback in year, but you'd certainly get payback within a reasonable investment window, that 2 to 3 years. So I would say look for those areas with 3 FTEs or more. It's not a huge number, right? Three is pretty small. But anyway.
All right, thank you. Thank you for sharing your answers. So, I think that is it for today. Thank you everyone for joining. If you still have questions, do write us at webinars@newgensoft.com. And thank you again, Gavin and Sriram, for this impactful session. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank you
much. Have
all
a
and
great
good
day.
day.
Bye.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye bye.